so nice to be here with you this morning, and we've got a lot of fun stuff to cover. In fact, I have a lot of slides to get through and a very short 45 minutes to get through it all. So just to kind of lay some expectations right off the bat about what we're going to be discussing, you can see from the title, we're going to be preparing for agentic AI and digital commerce discovery disruption. That means we're going to be talking about on-site discovery as well as off-site in this particular presentation. And I also want to go a little bit deeper into agentic AI for you to talk about what it is, what it actually does, what it isn't, how to tell the real thing apart from something that is not the real thing. So before I get into that, may I have a quick show of hands? How many of you are actively experimenting with agentic AI right now? Oh, that's awesome. I knew this was a technically savvy audience, but it's nice to get some confirmation of that. Now, did you notice anything? My original headshot, I had blonde hair, and I switched up, and I didn't want to take new headshots, so I asked ChatGPT, the pro version, can you please just change my hair color for me? Now, this was done just a couple weeks ago, and you can see right away, it took some liberties with my appearance. It gave me some extra wrinkles around the eyes and around the jowl area. In fact, it kind of changed my face shape. I don't hate it, but I don't love it. But I wanted to use this to sort of point out that all I did was ask it very gently in the prompt, don't change anything about my face, just change my hair color. And it still took its liberties. So it shows that while we have amazing technology at our fingertips for marketing and experience design, there are some limitations still, even with really good prompt engineering. And this isn't even agentic. This is literally just generative AI still. So what else are we going to talk about? Well, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about myself in case you weren't here last year or you need a little refresher about why you should take me credibly on any of these subjects. Then we're going to talk about agentic AI for digital commerce and some use cases. Then, like I mentioned earlier, we're going to deep dive into agentic AI and what it actually is and what it entails, as well as answer engine optimization, or AEO, which is kind of a scary terrain for some folks, I'm sure. And then also composability, because after all, this is commercetools, right? So we're going to be talking about composability as a strategic AI enabler. But first, here's me. And this is my market. It's massive. There are over 450 logos on here, and you can see that the heart of what I'm actually covering, right here in the center, are the essential commerce platforms and applications. I view these as strategic orchestrators. Now, I know the legacy of commerce is that, they're platform offerings. They do a little bit of everything for everybody. But as we know in this particular room, I'm sure that kind of lends itself a little bit too easily to monolithic architectural narratives, or nowadays modular, monolith architecture narratives. And those can be kind of limiting in the context of AI and AI enablement. So you can see that my area of coverage is actually pretty well primed to cover all of this because from the onset, it's an integrations narrative. I'm talking about various kinds of best-in-breed solutions to create enterprise-ready storefronts and beyond. And my areas of expertise are artificial intelligence. My master's is in AI. I also have several awards in marketing, and I love covering when those two worlds combine. So let's talk about agentic AI for digital commerce, use cases, and predictions. Now, for some of these slides, they're going to have a lot of text on them, and no, I'm not going to just read everything verbatim off of the screen. So if you would like to, please feel free to take out your cameras, take pictures if necessary for anything that I don't go over in a lot of detail. Hit me up on LinkedIn, and I'd be happy to have that conversation to unpack some of that for you later on. But first, a prediction. As you probably just heard, and you heard yesterday as well, autonomous AI shopping will accelerate not only shopping experiences both on-site and beyond, but may also contribute to the diminishment of the brand era. Now, I know I'm not the first person to mention this, but it makes a lot of logical sense if you think about it. Because if you are not already a household name, it will become increasingly difficult in an agentified world to get there. And that means that your strategy must be very robust, and your content needs to be specifically structured in a way that translates to these agentic models, both on your own properties and unowned properties. By 2028, Gen AI-enabled marketplaces and search platforms, so social commerce narratives, as you just heard, as well as places like Amazon, Perplexity, ChatGPT in and of itself, may become the primary user interfaces for shopping and shopper experiences, which means that a lot of the customer experience won't be in your control directly. You will have a more indirect impact by nature of the kind of contextually relevant content that you are developing specifically about your product and your brand. And that is how you will gain authority in the future. It's not by catering to keywords a la search engine optimization, but instead more robust content models with a lot of context and authoritative communications. Online shopping and product discovery will experience a profound shift due to all of this, forcing an overhaul of corporate digital commerce strategies. One of the things that I really want you to focus on, well, actually, I want you to focus on all these, but this B2B modernization element. Because I cover not only B2C and retail commerce, but also B2B. And a lot of B2B organizations are wooed by the siren song of moduliths. They love them. They're like, oh, this is easy peasy, let's just insert your vendor here, right? Like, I'm not gonna name names, but we can all think of some right off the top of the head, right? And they're wooed by that because they think all we need is a storefront, right? We just need to stage a catalog or a digital showroom, and that's all we need. You know, just slap the catalog on a website. That would have been good 10 years ago. That would have maybe been great during COVID. But the nature of procurement is going to change so fundamentally in an agentic AI-enabled world that this is not enough. That they need to start thinking more like their B2C counterparts immediately. And that when they invest in their tech stacks, they need to think beyond just D2C. They need to think about how D2C will translate into B2B directly. Also, bots communicating with bots. You just heard Dirk mention this. I mean, this is right on the money, because some of your best shoppers, and particularly in B2B, may eventually be agents. And then there's also this kind of scary flip side of that argument, which is bad faith bots. You will need more robust security for every single part of your go-to-market, for every part of your commerce operations. Because for every bit of AI that you are engaging with, interacting with, and putting into your tech stack, you will need more robust security. So that needs to be in parallel. Focused shifts to products. So a lot of companies are going to have to shift to a very deliberate product-led strategy as opposed to brand first. And that's because they won't be able to get their brand in front of people unless they're reverting to social commerce, and those channels will become very crowded, and frankly crowded with agents. They will be crowded with AI. You will not necessarily be able to tell when you or your brand are engaging with a human operator, an actual live customer, or someone posing like a customer, a bot posing as a customer. Post-purchase will become a key differentiator in all of this, because what you lose in terms of control with brand identity up front, you need to regain when it comes to how you handle customer interactions after they've purchased something, and how you actually foster that trust and make it a continuous reinforcing virtuous circle. Channel ubiquity, unified commerce, transcended experiences. So channel ubiquity, you need to be everywhere your customers are, right? And that's nothing new. I've mentioned that in basically every talk track I've given in the last 3 years. But what's different now is that you need to think more about an integrated unified commerce strategy while you are aggressively syndicating that product content into as many channels digitally as possible. And then you must transcend the known experiences, what is expected of you, to create the kind of experiences that are continuous, connected, and always resonant with your customers. Because your customers, I mean, unified, if you think about it, is a systems narrative, right? Like, it is talking about what you're doing on the back end to provide that seamless transition between, you know, omni-channel use cases. The problem, though, is that your customers generally will not care how unified your systems are or how unified your approach are. What they want is for the interaction to transcend the channel, which is why I call that transcendent commerce. And then finally, inventory, product, and pricing strategies will overtake marketing in terms of relevance in commerce. And I know that's probably a spicy thing to say at this particular event with this audience, because I know a lot of you are in marketing roles. But frankly, the mechanisms for discovery outside of your branded website are going to focus much more on price, availability, and then also on other elements of product data. All of that needs to be very tight, and it needs to be something that you are deliberately crafting in a way that is easily ingested by these models. Let's talk a little bit about where we are in the growth trajectory of AI. So one thing you'll probably notice right away is that the degree of autonomy will increase with trust, technology, and policy maturity over time. And we are currently at an inflection point in the development of AI maturity. We are migrating from an ecosystem where humans were in the loop, i.e. prompt engineering. They were controlling a lot of the outputs via what I showed you at the beginning, where I changed my hair from blonde to red. You know, you're just asking the system, hey, can you please do this thing? And it spits it out. And then maybe you need to refine the prompts over time. But I think the media was a little premature when they started talking about how prompt engineering was going to be this great boom market for new jobs, because agents basically make this pointless. Because we're moving from humans being in the loop to being on the loop. They are monitoring the activities of autonomous AI, and they are refining that model over time, which means that their role is going to be much more technical in nature. They're going to have a very keen eye for what's actually going on with these very complex networks of algorithms. Because remember, agentic AI, like a lot of AI, is not a single algorithm. It is many algorithms combined. So I keep dancing around the point. What is agentic AI? Let's take a little bit of a deeper dive. Here are just a short list of potential examples of agentic AI for digital commerce. Obviously, there's conversational product discovery, and you've seen several demos of that throughout this particular event, and you'll probably see many more of them. You've probably seen them at other events you've attended as well. It's usually the chat interface in the little right-hand corner of your web interface or in your mobile interface, and you're just asking it things, or maybe you can use your voice and ask it questions. There's usually a little bit of a delay while it processes what you said, but you're able to use natural language to be able to have a conversation with the commerce system. There's also what I mentioned earlier, answer engine optimization. What is this? We'll go into a little bit more detail a little bit further on in this presentation, but just a little bit of foreshadowing. Answer engine optimization is when you get those generative AI results that give you very robust answers at the top of a search inquiry. And it basically it prevents traffic from going to your website for that discovery mechanism, because it's providing an amalgam of answers from various different retailers and brands and marketplaces to create a bigger answer at the top of the search results, and then sometimes they will also provide the products directly underneath in a carousel feed. Dynamic product recommendations, so this is something that when I wrote this deck, I meant specifically on site. You know, that the recommendations for the products that are coming through on the product listing pages will shift based on how the customer is actually engaging with the website, or perhaps it's happening directly in that chat interface. And you've probably seen plenty of demos of that as well. I know at NRF this year, that was a huge area of focus. Personalized promotions and offers. You've also heard quite a bit about that. But the whole goal here is to prevent revenue leakage, and frankly, to prevent your customers from becoming so dependent on the coupons that they refuse to shop with you unless you are basically bleeding cash to get them to do it. Proactive customer service. That's pretty self-explanatory. Checkout flow optimization. My favorite, returns and exchanges automation, when it's getting the information from your order management system of record, and it helps prevent all of that traffic going to your call center or whatever you are using to deal with returns. It just happens on its own, automatically. I love that. And then back-end workflow orchestration, tons of untapped potential here, but there's also a little bit of opportunity for shenanigans on the technology vendor side, because not all workflow engines that have some kind of LLM-enabled interface are agentic under the hood. This is a completely different thing, because these workflows are self-developing, self-healing, self-optimizing. They have agency. They can execute, and they can refine themselves over time based on what's working. They can test themselves over time based on what's not working. That's way different than just having a conversational interface superimposed on a traditional symbolic logic engine. This is IDC's taxonomy of agentic software, and you can see that there's a bit of a progression here. Modern AI agents can plan, and they can execute, and they're pulling from a lot of external tools to do all of this. So you can kind of see the devil is in the details. All of this is talking about AI, which is why when a vendor is talking to you about AI, you need to ask incredibly invasive questions about what do you mean? What kind of AI? What kind of algorithms? What are you doing with it? What is your roadmap? You don't be afraid to ask those invasive questions because they're not really invasive. They're the important parts of this conversation because there's a lot of AI washing going on. And we've all seen it. We've all seen it, particularly when companies are trying to get acquired. They do a lot in what I've seen in the last couple years to try to make themselves look like they're AI first, when they may not be. This is the distinction. There we go. So agentic AI falls under the big umbrella of AI. And this is, again, why the devil is in the details, why you have to ask so many questions. And before I get into the slide, I want to say a big shout out to my colleagues at IDC. This was a huge initiative to build out this framework for discussing AI among multiple analysts at our organization. So I just want to give them some credit there. But you can see AI is a big umbrella term, and that's why that AI washing is so pernicious. It is really hard sometimes to see what's actually going on. Like, you need to see the trees, not just the forest. Because ML, machine learning, fits in there. You've got deep learning. You've got agentic AI, generative AI. They all overlap with each other in this umbrella of AI. And to be perfectly frank, you know, the old school version of what AI is, or what it means definitionally, could incorporate things that we take for granted every day as just normal software. Because it's the automation of intelligence, the automation of human-based processes. But now we're getting beyond that to much more complex conversations about much more sophisticated algorithms. So one thing that I think might be very resonant to know in this particular room is that this is inherently a composability narrative under the hood. Because the agent is just a building block. You can't do everything you need to do with just one. And frankly, this agent is already componentized into multiple different kinds of AI, usually with a large language model acting as the UI that you're interfacing with. And it is doing a lot with a lot of different algorithms. Agentic AI is the system of all of these systems, of all of these different networks of algorithms collaborating. They might all be dedicated to a specific skill, you may have heard that term, where they're all working in concord with each other. Multiple agents collaborate, learn from each other, and make decisions to make actions in a broader context. This is what helps them make decisions. It's what helps them execute. And usually they are pulling data not only from, you know, their training data, their public-facing sources, but also your proprietary business intelligence with a moat around it. You know, usually in some kind of retrieval augmented generation scenario or something akin to that, where they are pulling from your data sources without incorporating that data into the public-facing models. I'm not going to walk through all this because it's really complicated, but this is just an example to help you differentiate what an AI assistant and agent does and how that is different in a true technical aspect. So you can kind of see here that this here, what the agent actually is, has a lot of feedback loops baked into it, which is why it looks so complicated. Whereas with a regular agent, it's, you know, prompt engineering. You give it a prompt, it spits out an output, and then maybe you have to go back and ask it to refine it. You know, there is some persistence of memory now baked into many of these platforms, so you can do this in a reiterative fashion to try to get the right results. But here, you're not really doing much. You're just kind of saying, this is what I need, or the system is able to detect what it needs automatically, and it just kind of does it. And then the only thing that's needed is that the human on the loop monitoring these activities goes, yeah, that's what I want, or no, this isn't right, go back to the drawing board. And another really good sticking point, I mentioned workflows earlier, there's a major distinction between a traditional workflow engine that is manually programmed or has symbolic logic under the hood and one that is agentic, because one that is agentic can build itself out. Now, I think there's a lot of utility to be had in having those sort of traditional workflow engines that a human operator has built and just having the conversational interface superimposed upon it. Because, I mean, think about just one specific use case where that would come in handy, and that's with the brain drain, right? Like as salespeople, for example, they retire, they leave the workforce. When you want to actually get somebody new in their role and enable them to be a power user of those systems, they might get lost not knowing how to actually work within the parameters of these workflows, or what it is that they actually need to do every day. In a situation where they could just prompt the system, does a workflow exist for this? Is this an automated process? And it could spit out the information and say, yeah, that's automated, fairly automated. We have a workflow for that. They know they don't have to submit a ticket to IT, and they can just work within those constraints. With an agentic workflow, I mean, the bot may be the salesperson. Like, this whole thing might be automated someday. And in fact, you can almost guarantee that that will be the case. Some characteristics of AI agents. Unlike standalone large language models or rule-based software hardware systems, agents have these 4 common features. They can plan. They can make decisions. They use tools. So in fact, generative AI is a tool that is leveraged by these agents. Perception. Now, I'm not going to get too nitpicky about the philosophy of artificial intelligence and perception and what they can intuit, what they understand, because that's more of an academic debate for philosophers. But I will say that it is capable of contextual awareness to a degree that it can influence the decisions that it's making to enable those decision-making processes. And again, there's a little bit of persistence of memory baked in here. So that way, when your customers visit your website, for example, and they interact with the chat interface, as soon as they either identify themselves or the system can determine that, that this is this user based on their IP or whatever, then the conversation can just start right where it left off. Which also, by the way, helps minimize instances of fraud and shenanigans through customer service use cases. Because one of the things you may have known if you are in commerce is that sometimes bad faith actors will call your call center, they'll be talking to you on social media, they'll be texting your customer service line, they'll be doing all 3 at the same time, going through some pretty histrionic mechanics to try to get freebies, right? Like, unfortunately, that is just part and parcel of dealing with the public sometimes. There are a lot of people out there, and some of them are kind of crazy. But the good news is that the agents can pick up on this. They can tell, oh, this person's talking to you in 3 different interfaces at the same time and telling 3 different stories. Let's get them back to some kind of terra firma. Let's talk about answer engine optimization, which I've briefly let you know a little bit about, but we are actively seeing a rapid transition away from keyword-based search and discovery mechanisms towards one that is all about those amalgamated answers generated at the top of the SERP. The impact of answer engines and AEO. Well, brand is losing ground to product utility. Again, it comes down to your product details. It really is a revolutionary thing if you think about it, because we're used to being able to appeal to consumers emotionally, appealing to their greatest aspirations, telling them, this is who you could be by virtue of buying this or engaging with our brand or our service. And you may not be able to do that up front. You might be able to do that in social commerce scenarios, but again, those are becoming much more agentic. They're becoming much more AI-enabled. It's a brave new world for sure. But when it comes to your own website, I mean, you should consider that still your cornerstone. If you manage to funnel traffic into your website, it helps build the trust. It verifies the things that they're hearing about you in those generated summaries at the top of SERP. It helps verify what's going on social media. AI-powered search increasingly favors practical product specifications, review data, pricing data. Pricing data is a big one. Lowest price, unfortunately, typically wins in e-commerce scenarios. And particularly when there's a carousel pitting you against all your competitors in a head-to-head fashion, you can imagine this is going to become a little bit more transactional over time. And then also inventory availability, because it has to be localized, right? So if you're using distributed order management practices and you have various warehouses spread all over the globe, it will pull information and be able to tell that customer, well, you know what? If you buy this online today, you can pick it up in the store same day, right? That is excellent information for customers who are looking for that. But if you don't have that in an easily ingestible format for these platforms for discovery, you will lose out on that sale. And again, an increase in zero-click searches, as in your website traffic will drop off if you are not prepared for this. And in fact, it may still drop off either way because of this. But the good news is there's an actual relationship between your website traffic going down and sales going up. If that is happening to you right now, that is an indication that your content strategy is working in this environment, that you are creating contextually relevant information that is easily ingested into these interfaces for discovery. Good job. But not everybody is there. And so if you notice the drop in site traffic and a drop in sales, it means there's something probably wrong with your content model, particularly as it pertains to this more transactionally relevant data around your products. So how do you prepare for this new age of AEO? You have to recognize that you have to lose a little control to these platforms. You have to play along. Search is shifting from queries to answers, and context is king. Context is everything, which means you don't just need a single model for your content strategy and how you're going to get your branding and your product information across. You have to have multiple. And frankly, you should be using agents to do this at an outrageously robust scale. Visibility requires structured, model-friendly content. Authority and relevance define inclusion. So your authority scores in places like Google still very much matter, but how you build upon that needs to, again, have that really large content model where you're not just creating content for the sake of content or attention, but you're trying to capture every single query use case that might be necessary for discovery in these platforms. And then traditional SEO tactics, which were keyword bound for the most part, are no longer sufficient. That doesn't mean that you still shouldn't invest in SEO. Unfortunately, you're probably entering a scenario, particularly if you're B2C or do business directly with the consumer, where you have to do all of it. Other factors behind the evolution of SEO and AEO, well, again, reduced visibility of source links. But as you probably noticed if you've engaged with Gemini and the search results that show up in the top of Google, like it does show links. Perplexity, if you're shopping in Perplexity's new shopping platform, you'll recognize that they provide source links. So again, the authority of your products and your brand relevant to the query with a lot of context may increase your chances of having that link become surfaceable. But ideally, you would also like to be able to take advantage of zero-click, where someone can buy something directly from those platforms. Prominence of AI overviews, huge one. I keep hammering away at that, but that one's very, very, very big. Changing user behavior. I mean, they're going to become more dependent on these platforms, and you can hear a lot of anecdotal stories about this, both in the media and on social media, and frankly, probably amongst yourselves while you're chit-chatting. It's just easier to go to some of these platforms with Gen AI under the hood and ask it questions and continue a dialogue and to find the products, services, and brands that you're looking for through those interfaces. Also, click-through rate for organic results has dropped for a lot of the buyers of technology that I have interviewed over the past 6 months. The range hovers around 8 to 19% on average, but the highest drop-off that I saw was about 64%, which is huge. That is a massive drop in organic search traffic. But the thing is, again, it's not just the drop in traffic that's relevant. How is this impacting your sales? For the company that dropped 64%, it was catastrophic. It was a really bad time for them. But for some of these in this 8 to 19% range, their content was robust enough for this particular new world that we're entering, that even though the click-through rate went down, their sales actually went up. Digital stores are already experiencing a decline in organic search traffic and revenue due to AI-enabled discovery. But others maybe experience a spike in traffic because they have the authority to be able to use the hyperlinks generated by those systems to direct traffic to their site instead. So it's a much more indirect play, as you can imagine, because there's only so much you can actually influence in this model of discovery. And it takes a lot of work to do it. Hence why you need to fight agents with agents. You need to use your own agentic AI because the scale of the challenge is so vast that that is what will be required. And really focus on product data, pricing data. Pricing is huge. And then order, inventory, and fulfillment data, including localized information if you have it. So let's talk a little bit about composability as a strategic enabler, because as I've mentioned, this is a very technologically savvy audience, and a lot of this agentic AI conversation is at heart a composability narrative. Because whether you are using something like Hugging Face and you are developing your own systems of agents, or you are using, commercially available options, I mean, at the end of the day, you'll want to experiment, and you'll want the agility and flexibility of an architecture model for digital commerce that enables you to play around with these agents, particularly as they replace a lot of the software that many enterprises have become accustomed to over the course of several decades. Composable architecture enables AI agility. It is required. It is so important to recognize this. And this is why not all flavors of composability are created equally. Because as many have mentioned before me, and I have mentioned in the past, you can compose a system without it being mock. But a mock-style architecture model is probably best equipped to help you meet the challenges of this era, because the flexibility is built in by design. The agility is the point of the exercise. Whereas if you have more monolithic platforms in your stack, you basically have to work within the technical constraints of those platforms, which can be not only very limited, but can also be very time-consuming. And in this world, probably more than any other time in the past, time is everything. This technology for AI is growing at an exponential rate. We've heard it for years. But I mean, you can see it when you play around with it and see the changes. That what you're seeing today will be radically different three weeks from now, 3 years from now. It could be completely autonomous. And so you need to be very careful to make sure you're not locking yourselves into architecture models that are not fit for purpose. AI demands flexibility at every layer. And future-proofing requires vendor independence. Because one of the things you may not know, but you may know, right? I mean, this is a very savvy audience, as I mentioned earlier. But just for the sake of clarity, the vendors that I work with in digital commerce are not all created equally. And some of them, they are struggling right now to transition from a per-seat monetization model to a consumption-based monetization model as they build more AI into their products. Frankly, they're struggling with their AI messaging. They are almost all universally struggling with how to price their AI features. So it's like an experiment still for them, but it's one that's happening live in front of all of us. So their pricing today probably won't be the same next year. What features are available definitely won't be the same as what they're providing right now. And one of the other things to kind of keep in mind is some of these categories of software, particularly when it comes to things that control product information and the catalog, may become completely obsolete because there's a lot of platform amalgamation going on because of this AI. You've probably noticed, for example, that CMSs and PIMs and CPQs maybe even, right? Like they're building a lot of different generative AI technology into their products that creates a lot of functional overlap between them. So it kind of begs the question of, do we actually need a CMS and a PIM? Do we need them both? What if one becomes the other and vice versa? Like, you need to make sure that you have the independence from those vendors that as they flip-flop and change, that you are not locked into something that is no longer fit for purpose. Structured data is the foundation for AI. And what a lot of organizations are currently doing is they are trying to find ways to take unstructured data, make it structured, and then use that to train their own models. AI accelerates change, and composability absorbs it. As models improve and use cases expand, composable systems adapt faster, particularly if they have competent IT people at the helm, because that is kind of the caveat to a lot of this narrative, is that this is not for digitally immature organizations. You need to have a certain level of digital maturity to really harness not only the AI, because that's the irony. Like, the AI is being sold to all organizations of all sizes and all levels of digital maturity, but their data isn't right. And therefore, they don't move forward with those implementations once they get past like the experimental proof of concept phase. And it's because they're too digitally immature to do it. So the same level of digital maturity you would need to pull off composability well is also required for AI. And you need to preserve long-term technical and strategic relevance. So you can't replace all of the people that are working in your IT roles. There needs to at least be some who are capable of being on that loop, who can monitor those activities and coordinate them. A little bit more about Mock and how that fits in with strategic AI initiatives. API-first design supports AI integration because, as I mentioned, API-first design allows AI tools to plug into specific functions like search, merchandising, and chat without overhauling the full stack. Modularity, which I know that that's kind of a fraught term because other vendors who are not Mock tend to abuse this term a bit, but it supports experimentation. Mock, in particular, enables easy testing of AI tools like recommendation engines or content generators. And that agility helps digital native firms adopt AI faster than those who are stuck in legacy systems. Cloud native infrastructure enables elastic AI workloads. I think that this is really important because as you start to build out your content, for example, I kept mentioning how robust the content strategies, plural, need to be in this new world. You need an infrastructure that can accommodate all of that without it becoming so complicated that you can no longer navigate it functionally. Like, let the systems take care of the complexity and abstract it away for you so that way you can focus on business. The Mock mindset encourages organizational agility, full stop. And Mock can complement but not replace enterprise AI stacks. Like I said, they're very similar in terms of what is demanded to do them well, the level of expertise required, and many of you who work in IT roles and are champions of composability are probably some of the first adopters of agentic AI, particularly the kind that you have to develop yourself and experiment with. So before I leave you today, I would like to give you some implementation and change management success factors, some things to look for and actionable insights about tomorrow. One, this is not shocking to anyone here. Decouple key systems where possible. Prioritize modularizing critical systems like your PIM, your OMS, your CMS, to create integration points for AI tools without full stack dependencies. And again, a lot of this is coming from a really frustrating place for me, because the past year or so, I've heard a lot of narratives about unified commerce not being about omni-channel, retail, where it's physical, phygital, and online, whatever you want to call it, but how this is like for platforms, that this is about having big monolithic platforms again, which is part of the reason why I personally have always sort of rejected the term unified, because it can be abused in this manner. But anyway, it's kind of penetrated and become part of the zeitgeist, so we have to use it. But I just want to mention that the problem with that narrative is that a lot of that functionality may become redundant, may become obsolete. So those more monolithic commerce platforms may become kind of pointless in the future if agents are taking over a lot of those features and functions. And then when it comes to things like PIM, OMS, CMS, CPQ, ERP, you name the system. Again, a lot of functional overlap, and they're designed in a way where you're sort of hiring a ton of people under an antiquated notion of what it means to be an enterprise based on headcount, and that you are buying software specifically for those particular human operators to work within. you can kind of see how that is not really fit for purpose in an agentic AI world. Because it's not that we're intentionally going out of our way to displace human operators, but the more manual stuff you have baked into your internal processes, the more wetware problems you will encounter, the more human error you will see. And so it's really important to recognize that a lot of those tools are the victim of Conway's law at the end of the day. A lot of organizations are going to be seeking out things like inverse Conway maneuvers to dial that back and find better systems that have more AI embedded in them, so that way they don't need all these different licenses. And they probably won't need all the people working in those systems either. Hence why so many of the vendors I talk to struggle when it comes to the transition away from per-seat models to consumption-based monetization. Design for scalability. Choose modular or microservices-based platforms that can evolve with new channels, SKUs, and pricing models. I feel like in this room that's fairly self-explanatory. Invest in API governance early. Standardize APIs across business functions to ensure AI models can access clean, structured, and secure data as needed. I've heard some people say that APIs may become obsolete in an agentic AI-enabled world. I think quite the opposite, and so I wanted to make sure I put that in there. But I will say that, again, the more AI you build into a product, the more vulnerabilities you are injecting into that system. So you'll want to make sure that the governance model is tight. Design for model portability. So avoid hardwiring AI tools into the stack. Instead, use abstraction layers and orchestration platforms, which, again, I see commerce being a key one of those, to support switching between models. Treat your data architecture and your AI infrastructure as being one and the same. And this is really important because, again, that lack of digital maturity, a lot of times that's because the sources of truth for data about your organization may be coming from a lot of different sources. Some, particularly in some of the B2B organizations I talk to, they've been working in for 25 years solid, and they're just duct taping all of those different things together. It's kind of a problem because how are you going to use AI with data that may be redundant, full of errors, and not fit for consumption in an AI model? It requires them to invest a profound amount of capital into trying to get all that right so they can actually become part of this new AI revolution as well. So if you view the data as being primary and then using that for AI, you're in good shape. And then finally, build cross-functional AI readiness teams in your organization. Literally everyone that works in your company should know on at least some basic level how to work in these tools. Now, the good news is that a lot of agentic AI tooling is meant to be really business friendly. It's meant to be really user friendly. It's using natural language prompts in most cases because the generative AI is the interface for that engagement. And so it shouldn't be hard, but it is. At IDC, we've got a lot of data that supports the notion that change management and reluctance on the part of people within your organization to adopt these technologies are probably the #1 barrier to actually making this a successful sort of initiative internally. And it makes sense because they're hearing a lot of talk and they're seeing the layoffs in tech. They don't want that happening to them and their jobs. And it is kind of a fantasy to say, well, we're just going to reskill everybody. I think most people can see through that and realize that that's not actually the case, or maybe they just don't want to be reskilled. Maybe they like their job the way it is. You have to figure out how you're going to get around that or work with it, right? Like how to deal with the psychological aspect of this with the humans that are part of this process, because you can't just let them all go. And then there's this other thing where if you have AI readiness teams, they can help smooth that process. They can become champions of the technology. They can not only ensure that it's being leveraged properly, but also that people aren't as scared of it. And frankly, anyone who is scared of AI replacing their jobs, they should think twice about that a little bit, because while not everyone can be reskilled and learn how to code overnight, there are things like vibe coding out there. There are different technologies that they can be leveraging for fun, just to learn something new, just to learn how to become part of this moment in time, because it's only going to happen once, right? It's like a lot of things. It's like when SaaS hit the scene for the first time and the cloud revolution occurred, or when computers went from being something that only the rich could afford to being something that everyone has in their pocket all the time. So let's make the most of this opportunity while we have it. So again, I'm Heather Hershey. I'm from IDC. This is where you can find me. Please follow me on LinkedIn if you'd like to continue the discussion. And thank you so much for your time. Bye-bye.